This is the Pyro Archon, and this was really nothing more than an excuse to use these for the first time in a video. When it comes to insanely high expectations and hopes for a character, there is nothing quite like a brand new Archon. Okay, yeah, I know, I get it. There's tons of reasons we all get excited for characters. Everyone has their own likes and interests and what we want. But when it comes to the Archons, they are like the great unifier. And not only that, they never really disappoint. That is, unless you're one of the people that is disappointed by a motorcycle being in your fantasy game, which, yeah, it is very silly, but you know what? It's fun. Now, even in the context of Archons, players have the highest expectations for these units, but none quite as much as the Pyro and the Cryo Archon. Understandably so. These are elements that we have always had not exactly the best representation of, and Pyro specifically, which I found has the highest expectations of any unit that has ever been talked about, not only lacks what we typically expect from an elemental support, but also has two of the most meta-dominant 4-stars, which also happen to be two of the most hated units in the game, that being Bennett and Xiangling. You cannot throw a stone in a crowd of Genshin fans without hitting somebody who is willing to write a 5-page essay on how much they hate or are sick of these units. And you know what? I am almost a member of that group because I am so sick of Bennett's circle. I feel like a dog wearing a shock collar in the world's smallest lawn, but I don't mind including him in my teams because he's just such a good unit. But people really wanted Xiangling and Bennett to just bite the dust and Mavuika to power creep one or both of them. Which I gotta ask, if you were hoping that she would replace Bennett somehow, did you honestly have hoped that that would happen? I think if Hoyo could do it all over again, there is no chance in hell they would repeat Bennett's kit.
I mean, it kind of just comes across as a giant mistake, and it's kind of hard to believe it. There was a point in 1.0
where people thought he was a bad unit. A lot of those same people also thought Chi-Chi was S tier though, so you know, not the most credible sources. That aside, Bennett's element really just isn't that significant to his kit. You could change him to literally any other element in the game, and all that would change is while his resonance would be different, he would counter a different shield, and he would battery a different unit. But that would certainly make Xiangling a lot worse of a unit, and I don't think people would complain. Not that it matters anymore, because Mavuika seems to have just replaced her. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know all the numbers and details about everything and every team that Mavuika or Xiangling could be in, but what anybody could tell you is that Mavuika is infinitely easier to use with an elemental skill that you just tap and lasts 15 to 18 seconds, something like that. I think C1 changes that, compared to Xiangling's elemental burst, which is ludicrously expensive. Not only that, but Mavuika's range on her skill is pretty damn impressive, and she's just dropping tactical nukes on everything around you. And if you for some reason get bored of that, you can just put her on field, press the E again, and start doing donuts. She works so beautifully as a DPS support hybrid, succeeding at what Raiden tried in 3.0 but utterly failed at until Dendro came along, which honestly she still didn't do great at, because then you gotta build like 1000 EM and then her burst does nothing. You can certainly build her in two different ways, but unlike Mavuika can do the same thing with just the same artifact set, and she does really well at it. Having said that, the topic of the video, did Mavuika meet the insane expectations? Well, obviously I can't speak for you guys, but I can talk about my own expectations and what I hope for from the Pyro Archon.
I can immediately say that she exceeded my expectations in one big way. I didn't necessarily expect her to be a DPS, at least such a good one as C0. The Archons so far have been mostly supports. The one that strictly broke away from that mold was Raiden Shogun, but at the time it really felt like we were lacking Electro DPS. Pyro, on the other hand, yeah, really no shortage. We also literally just got Arlecchino 5 minutes ago, and she's such an overpowered Pyro DPS that I really didn't think they were going to try to release another Pyro DPS so soon, because if the Archon ended up weaker than Arlecchino, well, that just feels kind of sad. Not to mention, with Mavuika in the mix now, 10 of the now 16 Pyro characters are main DPS. Now, despite that insane number, there's really not all that much competition. Hu Tao was really holding down the fort for almost all of Genshin's lifespan. Up until Arlecchino, she was the undisputed queen of Pyro DPS. Linny had what I would call a respectable attempt. Despite that, the poor guy couldn't have much more going against him if he tried. He's almost entirely married to Bennett, more than almost any character in the game, and that's not what people want to hear. And in case you're wondering how that goblet turned out that was just on screen, it's not very good. He's a male, he was released just before an Archon, and he's basically Pyro Ganyu. It's almost like the poor guy was developed in a lab to be as unappealing as possible to as many people as possible. I'm not hating on him, I'm just saying that nobody talks about this guy. Linny has got to be one of the most forgotten characters in all of Genshin Impact. It's almost like he was never released. Arlecchino and Hu Tao, on the other hand, insanely popular. Hu Tao even just got a skin, which is probably good timing. We can send her off in her best, because, well, okay, that's not true. There are so many mega fans of Hu Tao, you could release 30 better Pyro DPS DPS, and she will still see a lot of play because people love her so much. But for me and my account, Arlecchino alone already made it so I was never really going to use my Hu Tao again. I was never a big fan of her playstyle, and Arlecchino is insanely fun. And now thanks to the addition of Mavuika, I even look at Arlecchino and think, how often am I really going to use you anymore? Because even despite the fact that I don't think Mavuika is insanely stronger than Arlecchino, I do believe she is stronger. But Mavuika is just so goddamn flexible. Pyro DPS, doing like a traditional vape DPS. Yeah, she can do that. Pyro Nuvolette. Yeah, she's that as well. Maybe like giant nukes where you just do like 1,000,000 damage in one hit. Well, Mavuika can do that easier than almost any unit in the game. She is absolutely ridiculous. And not to mention you can do all of those things, including supporting with one build. Just one artifact build. I absolutely did not expect her to be so flexible and so strong. It is safe to say that the monster duo that I called Arlecchino and Nuvolette has officially become the monster trio. So did she meet DPS expectations? Oh, way beyond. Okay, let's just lead with it. Mavuika versus Xiangling. I'm not here to answer that question if it's a question you're still asking. Other people have probably done that, and they are definitely way more qualified to answer it than me. I really don't give a shit about the numbers if she's a little bit stronger or like a little bit worse, or if Xiangling can do a little bit more pyro. I could not care less. Xiangling is an incredibly annoying character to use. I don't hate her nearly as much as some other people seem to, but when you have a character that is completely reliant on an elemental burst, and they themselves are absolutely dreadful at getting their own burst back, that's a surefire way of me disliking a character. It drives me absolutely nuts. Go into the Spiral Abyss. You're fighting some godless abomination like the Wee Nut. You use your elemental burst, your Pyronado, the thing that's supposed to carry you to greatness. The Wee Nut burrows underground, for God's sakes. Now you sit there, impotent, sad, depressed. You question your life choices. Xiangling sits in the corner while everyone else is doing the job they were hired to do. Only it's not going so well because Xiangling was part of your plan. Your team relies on her for better or for worse. Thankfully, I think those days are behind us because whether or not she does as much damage as Pyronado, I, again, do not care. So far, it seems like it does more damage, but I have C2, not R1 Mavuika, but I at least put the bacon on her. She's doing well enough, and I see her hitting pretty damn hard, about as hard as I've ever seen my Xiangling hit. Only, she is tapping an elemental skill for like 15 to 18 seconds and just forgetting about it. No energy, no nonsense, just a really easy to use skill that gives amazing results. That's not even the best part. The best part is unlike something like Raiden's, which hits like a wet noodle, sounds like a wet noodle, and is just all around disappointing outside of a little bit of electro application, Mavuika's is more like a tactical nuke that just indiscriminately fires off at anything around you without you having to do anything. It's fantastic. That part exceeds my expectations in every way I possibly could have had. The duration is good. The damage is good. The AoE is phenomenal for the kind of skill it is. The only negative I could possibly say about it is by using it, you are not using Mavuika as a main DPS, which I really thoroughly enjoy. And it's not even just the damage of her elemental skill and what it can do similarly to Pyronado, because her Ascension passive also makes it so when you use her elemental burst to activate it, she does a Yelan-like damage percent buff. And as long as you're not doing something like slotting Mavuika into an international team where every party member is contributing a good amount of damage, it's going to be substantial when you're just adding a ton of damage percent to your main DPS. And I mean, it's a hell of a lot better than picking up the little pepper that Guaba leaves behind. So in case it wasn't obvious, even as a support, Mavuika far exceeded my own expectations. Sure, she's not like the Yelan or Xingqiu of Pyro that some people wanted and keep hoping for, but she definitely gets the job done and does Pyro supporting way better than any unit that we've had so far, in my opinion. She's doing everything I want her to do as a support. She's doing everything I currently want her to do as a support. I can use her for Milani. I can use her in Ayato's team if I want. I can do anything I've been doing with Xiangling, and so far it's all felt pretty good. But there's still one more tiny thing to talk about. This is easily where I had the highest personal expectations. What Mavuika can do in the the open world. Yeah, the oven world. Good job, me. The open world exploration stuff. Natling characters have set an insanely high bar, especially while they are within the region of Natlan. And prior to the Pyro Archon's release, I made a lot of jokes and predictions about what Mavuika might do in the open world. At first, I was saying things like she was going to fly through the air like the Human Torch. I thought she was going to have like a jetpack or something Pyro related, or just be like a god of everything and do everything. And in a way, she did that. I certainly didn't see a motorcycle that could fly, go across water, and climb up mountains coming,
Like, I gotta say, it's a lot of fun, as silly as it may be. When I first got word that she was able to do everything, I was thinking, like, is she gonna literally do everything better than everyone and just be like the god of the overworld? And no, not quite. She's more like a jack of all trades, master of none, but she can do all of these things well enough that really she's going to fill pretty much all of your needs, especially while in Natlan. But even outside of Natlan, she does really damn good at all of these things. Again, if you need to cross a gap in a ravine or something, she'll fly right over it. If you need to cross a little river, she'll go across it really quickly. And if you just need to cover some area on the ground, she can also do that really well. She really makes exploration teams that much better. Arlecchino was already so good because she was a DPS that was capable of doing something useful. Nuvolette can glide over water while he's charging his charge attack, but that's really kind of just like a funny haha thing, not something that's actually useful to do. Arlecchino was able to do something similar when she holds down her charge attack, being able to glide with her little wing. Not glide, but like fly over the ground, which also could go over water. And what's even better is two of her best teammates, Xiangling and Citlali, are also really good overworld characters. So you end up with basically an exploration team that also ends up being a borderline meta team. Throw Yelan in there if you want to start doing some vape DPS or something, and just also support her with a damage percent buff. You have another good overworld character and just an all-around solid team. Here at the end, I just want to talk about something that did let me down a little bit and where she did not meet my own expectations. Natlan units and their reliance on Night Soul and Phlogiston kind of gave me the expectation that the Pyro Archon was going to be like the great enabler of Night Soul Burst, but instead, it actually kind of ended up being the opposite, where Mavuika seems to heavily rely on being in a party with Natlan characters. And unfortunately, I feel like that's going to limit her future applications and teams, but I don't know, Natlan is still rather young in terms of lifespan, and who knows what the roster is going to end up looking like. But I really was expecting her to be the one that enabled other characters to do Night Soul better, and almost feel like they were in Natlan outside of Natlan. It's a really minor thing, but I can't help but feel like this is going to make Mavuika's kit age kind of poorly in the eyes of the community, and that a lot of people are going to wish for her, thinking that she is a really strong character, and she is, but they're just not going to have the units required to really make her just go off and be the insane unit she is.